Oh, yes, great.
Yeah, and
Good to see you virtually.
so I
Yeah.
think I'll just share that Raghu sir was on his way to the airport yesterday when we had to inform him that for the safety we have closed down, and he has to unfortunately return back to home and give the talk online. So sorry for the trouble, sir, and thank you for agreeing to come and deliver the talk online. So I think before I start, Raghu sir, do we have consent to record your uh, presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Great. And also, I'm handing over the baton as MC to Geeta. Geeta is our senior policy analyst at CRAI. So, Geeta, please introduce the speaker and take over. Thank you.
Cool. And so next, our eminent speaker, Raghu Dharmaraju is here. And to give a brief introduction about his experience, he has around decades of experience in founding and scaling enduring innovations and institutions, which are primarily focusing on bridging deep tech research with social impact and business ventures. His work includes shaping national policies and
I'm
developing.
sorry to interrupt, Geeta. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Professor Ravi is already assigned a session chair for this session, and I think I'll hand over the baton to him. My mistake. I'm sorry. I was supposed to hand it over to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ravi sir, sorry. Mistake.
Okay.
This is all in the family. No worries.
Yep. So anyway, so Raghu is a great friend, and both of ITM and me. And thank you, Raghu, once again for agreeing to do this trip to the airport in Bangalore and go back home, and hopefully actually get you to complete the trip soon. So quickly to introduce Raghu. So Raghu has been has an amazing career trajectory, right? So he's somebody who not only works in deep tech but has actually taken the tech to the field and has had real impact on the ground, not just once but in multiple occasions, right? And then he decided to come back to India and then help improve the tech for health ecosystem here. Currently, he's the CEO of Hartford. Your designation keeps changing like every few
It is
months.
CEO.
Huh?
It is CEO.
The CEO of Art Park. Great. And but he's also apart from being involved with Art Park, he's been very active in multiple national initiatives, including being involved in the Grand Challenges program run by the government, and as well as being very closely involved with various data-related initiatives from ICMR. And we are also very proud that Raghu is an alumnus of IIT Madras. And I'm also jointly proud that he's also an alumnus of UMass Amherst, from where I also graduated. And I thank Raghu once again for accepting to give the talk. And over to you.
Sure. First, it's a bummer not to be on campus. It's always a thrill to be back on campus. And it's really an honor and privilege, Ravi, Dhaval, and Gokul, for inviting me to do this. Before getting started, what I thought was I was actually frantically working on the background on a Mentimeter poll just to know my audience a bit, right? So I'm going to, if you allow me to share my screen, I wanted to actually start with that, right? Are you able to see the screen? Can someone confirm you're able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I request everyone to literally don't spend too much time, not more than 5 seconds. When I say responsible AI, what's the first word or short phrase? Short phrase, nothing more than 3 words, right? That comes to your mind. I have 65 people online, so I'm hoping we'll get some representation of what people think of.
So for people who haven't used Menti before, scan the QR code or use the code on the screen to go and enter your.
I'm going to stop sharing just to not, lo and behold, bias. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds before I share my screen again. Please use the link that I had shared. Okay, I'm going to come back online, hoping everyone managed to get it in. Okay, I'm going to give it 10 seconds and then we'll go back. Yeah. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So, very interesting. Just want to call out trust, ethics, responsibility, safety, usual suspects. But I'm also happy to see some other things such as social impact, uh, act responsibly. And we are going to actually dig on some of those aspects that we typically do not think of. I'm also happy to see empathy, right, in there. So let me see if I can go to my next slide. This is the other one I wanted to quickly get a sense for. Using the same link that you have here, if you can also kind of say what describes you best, just to know my audience a little bit. It's always useful to know who you're speaking with. Option 7 is other. I didn't manage to get the other in because I was doing this last minute. I was just trying to understand how to understand. All right. See lots of students. There are some faculty and researchers with AI/ML, interpret AI/ML broadly, data science. If you're more of a statistician, that counts to all that. I mean, you don't, doesn't have to be ML. Okay, I'm going to give this 5 seconds and then move. I think we have a sense of what this virtual room is like. All right. So with this, I'm going to actually switch to my presentation, if you don't mind, and I'm going to just see. And as I do that, I should really congratulate the organizers. My heart goes out to them. You put a lot of effort to bring an international event like this together, and then you have to go to virtual. It's and it's kind of a reminder back to our COVID days in some sense. and I'm actually going to start with something that
I blame this on global warming.
Sorry. Yes, of course. You blame. And I also want to remind us that pandemic risks increase manifold through with global warming, right? So let me see if I can share. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So again, thanks again. I wanted to talk about what we call our making AI count for the next 5 billion. Folks who have heard me before will find themes that I often talk about. I should first put out some disclaimers. I'm not an AI researcher. Uh, the role I play is that of uh, often in companies, these are called innovation managers. Some companies, they're called product managers, though I do not really like that term. Um, and my role has always been to figure out what's the problem that really needs solving, what are the kind of solutions that we need, and how do we build as well as really roll out that solution in a way we have impacted some meaningful scale, right? So that's the bias I'm bringing to the table. And uh, after COVID, we kind of asked this question of, okay, we used AI and data science to do so many things during COVID. And if COVID were to hit again, how would the world be different? And this is a question we ask because often we get stuck on specific innovations and do not think enough about how they all come together. And this is a theme you will find me touching on a few times, in the next 20 minutes or so. Right. So we said, imagine Shanti wakes up with a cough uh, in some remote rural India. She launches an app called Sahayak. Sahayak in many Sanskritic Indian languages stands for helper. She speaks to Sahayak in whatever native language she's most comfortable in. Sahayak understands her, takes her permission, asks her a few questions, and then there's an AI screening engine in the background that's using her digital markers such as cough, some health history based on her consent, but also some population scale intelligence in the form of One Health and climate surveillance platform that we call Savdhan, right? And out of this came three broad initiatives: language, health screening and diagnostics, and pandemic and climate resilience. Right? The idea was, and this is what I'm going to touch on today. I'm just going to use some examples from this. Over the last now 7 years, been deeply involved in building various types of AI-based solutions. And over that time, I've come to realize it's not AI-based solutions to make a difference. There's a lot more that needs to happen institutionally. I'll touch on this. Will not go into a lot of detail, but suffice to say that policy and capacity, the digital infrastructure, data, AI-based solutions, and then AI, right? And these are some areas that we work in. This is just to give you some sense. I'll not touch on them right away, right? So let me start with sort of the most foundational takeaway, I hope, especially the students here. Many of you are very experienced doing this. I probably have very little to share with the amazing researchers and professionals in the room. But the students, I would say, if you're thinking of really trying to make a difference with AI, the way to think about it is not just about AI. Think about AI-based solution. And what do I mean by AI-based solution? I sometimes use this tongue-in-cheek example of, until we can upload sewage and download water, everything has to work in the real, the physical world, right? Of course, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek example, but the reality is there is impact only if we can move atoms, and if we can move people, right? Literally and metaphorically. And to do that, you need to ask what systems already reach those people. There are two ways to think these things. One is you could say B2C, I'll go to direct to consumer. And because of tools that they use directly as an individual, and they have the ability to do that, we enable them. The other way to think about it is what are the systems and programs through which already touch billions, and you say, how are we going to bring AI into that, typically as part of some software products, maybe hardware too, right? Hardware plus software. But that does not become a solution without all the other pieces. That includes people, workflows, financial flows, data flows, so on and so forth. And I'll touch on these things. And ultimately, without the institutional policy and capacity building and systems design, these things don't stick. So you might imagine that a certain ASHA worker will use a certain type of AI, but unless it is in the policy and in the process that she should use such a tool, right? She's never going to do it. And turns out changing that policy and capacity is often the heaviest lift. In fact, I would go further and say it is probably the heavier lift. And if you were to ask me, 80% of the effort probably is in that, right? If you really want to have impact at scale, maybe in the remaining 20%, depending on the problem, maybe 15 to 18% is in the data and the systems around that. And maybe the remaining 1 to 2% is AI. And this is very humbling as for folks like us who are so excited about technology. But this is the reality, right? Let's use some examples. Right? So this is a picture I took from Bangalore's early COVID war room. I want to call your attention to that's the war room that came up as the first death in Bangalore happened, right? This later grew, and such war rooms came up in every city in India. And through those depressing 2 years, one of the things that gave me great hope was that folks from data science background worked incredibly closely with the health systems and the response mechanisms of the government. Everything from lockdowns to how many ICU beds do we need, how many oxygen cylinders do we need, was done using data science. I'm not going to argue about where it was done well, how well it was done. Certainly, there were certain failures, right? But especially during the first wave, it was amazing. But what was not so great is by the end of first wave, already this sort of close collaboration started falling away. And we know what happened during the second wave, right? So, and now all of our great cities have images such as this. This is not Gen AI. This is a real image. And between the pandemic and climate threats exacerbating each other, these are big challenges facing the engines of our economic growth and social progress. So we asked, how do we bridge that meaningfully? There's a typo there. Clearly, I did not use the most basic AI spell check. Meaningfully bridge implementers and researchers and embed data-driven decision making. Because COVID was like a war. What the war forces you is war dissolved all the barriers between implementers and researchers and engineers. We all came together. But is wartime the best time to build ammunition? Is that the best time to build weapons? I think not. I think we need to build default behavior during peacetime. And we asked, how do we do that? And we decided to do that using dengue, not because we sat in a room and came up with it. We worked closely with city and state officials, said what might we pick as a challenge that would prepare the systems more broadly. And why do I say, and what is the connection between prepare these systems and responsibility, right? Day-to-day basis, if the government health system doesn't work, it didn't impact most of the people in this room, right? If I did a poll, how many of you went to a government hospital or depended on government for any health services before COVID? The answer would have been zero or close to zero, maybe, right? But during COVID, we needed government's help to even find a bed. We all had friends and family that died. For once, we felt the pain of the bottom 1 billion or maybe 1.2, 1.3 billion people who essentially depend on public health services, right? And we said, let's take dengue as something that we constantly fight in these public health systems year to year basis. And it has become increasingly, quote unquote, unpredictable, right? And it's a climate sensitive challenge and hence prepares us on both health and climate fronts, right? And the process we came up with, and this is again something I want to call out, right? So one theme you'll find is systems. Another theme you'll find is this iterative co-innovation, co-implementation. So every time there's a new book on Amazon, all of our individual recommendation systems are getting upgraded. Every time you buy a book, that is getting upgraded. So a lot of this AI is truly live systems, right? But this stuff doesn't exist for continuously doing innovation for public health systems, even for something like pandemic prevention. So we work very closely with multiple stakeholders to first come up with what kind of problems, decisions, actions need addressing. We define data and analytical needs, leverage existing data, but a lot of new data has to be pioneered. There are systems both from policy and capacity perspective, but also from digital public infrastructure in terms of data management, sharing. You all have seen dashboards tend to have the most headline value, and sometimes AI grabs the headlines, but you see those are two small boxes in a large cycle, right? And the result is that now working with many stakeholders and many researchers, we've created a platform that's now helping in various areas. Karnataka has a dengue prediction system, outbreak prediction system that's down to sub-districts that is used on a weekly basis for response and control decisions and actions. And this is also now getting expanded to other areas. So I wanted to just highlight from this case study, if there is just one thing you want to take away, one is this whole idea of co-innovation, co-implementation. The reason that's important is these are not static products, right? It's not that I can build one dengue prediction model here and be done with it once for all. But the talent is really in these amazing ecosystems such as IIT Madras, Hull, IISc. And how do you bridge them? Because, well, it's going to be very difficult to build for-profit businesses. And when there are market failures in reaching in India, what I consider the bottom 1.2 billion or 1 billion people globally, the bottom 5 billion, you have to come up with new ways of bridging innovation impact. And this is one way to do that. And to me, the responsible in AI, the predominant theme in the Western world is to do no harm. That certainly is a core principle that we cannot violate, but I think it's a low bar. Our bar needs to be higher, and that bar is how do we use AI as a deliberate tool to really help, right, and lift the foundation for the underserved populations. And that to me is truly responsible AI, right? And I just wanted to use that as an example of building systems broadly for entire populations, and not just for privileged populations. And that requires a certain way of engaging, and the how we build these, how we choose the problems, whom we work with, how we build those solutions. All that is core to the responsible AI, ethos. The other mental model I want to share, and I'll use another example to illustrate this, is sorry, it's a bit text heavy. The idea is it's an iterative process. It's not a linear process. Sure, in a classroom setting, we often have this classroom settings or entrance examination. We have this luxury of someone framing the problem very precisely so that we can focus specifically on the technology or the AI aspects of it. But in the real world, that's not how it is, right? Typically, what you end up starting with is nothing but a bunch of parallel hypotheses, right? And the whole journey is iteratively building evidence and making informed choices on all these fronts. What exactly is the problem? What's the solution? And when I say solution, it's all the tech and non-tech components, not just the AI. Who is going to take that picture if you expect someone to take a picture? Is it part of their workflow? Is there internet there, right? If there is no internet, okay, the model has to work on the phone. Well, what can the model size be? What's the trade-off going to be then, right? What's the type of model you can build, right? Are you going to expect something very heavy to run? How much accuracy are you going to trade off? At what point would you consider it successful? So the evaluations definition becomes extremely critical, right? And these are things that will keep evolving. And then, of course, what's the AI and the aspect of defining the data requirements, collecting it, curating it, training the AI models, seeing how it performs, and continuously updating, right? So if in the whole presentation, for folks who have not yet worked out in the real world, if there is one slide I request you to remember, it's this: do not get frustrated. This is reality. And I'll use an example. Often we work with, I know several others attendees here also work with some of these nonprofit partners. One of these nonprofit partners we work with is Arman. And this is a global grand challenge winning application for frontline health workers, specifically ANMs, to help them manage high-risk pregnancies. So the initial idea, and often this is the initial idea you'll hear, is clinical decision support system, CDSS, right? This is the holy grail, right? Folks want to be able to figure out precisely what one needs to do with a specific patient and make decisions about that particular patient's care using LLMs, right? And this was the excitement, right? But working with them, understanding pros and cons, and also understanding where really there is desperate need and where we can get started quickly and progress towards a CDSS, is the Q&A chatbot. There's higher technical feasibility. There's greater user interest. What do I mean by greater user interest? What we saw was, I'll touch on this that a second. There was greater program alignment. What do I mean by program? Program is essentially, think of this as the processes, and the management and the whole system under which these ANMs work, right? And there's, of course, lower potential for harm. So we decided to start with that instead. And this is probably one of the first things you'll have to do in anything. Folks, especially who are not deeply aware of AI and its limitations, will come to you and ask for things, but the responsibility is on you to work with them to understand that problem deeply and modify that in both the problem statement and the solution approach, if required, right? And before building AI, I highly recommend that you invest a fair amount of time in understanding real user behavior. Right? And what do I mean by user behavior? Um, I'm sure I understand right now, within the first year or within a couple of years, design research and user research is part of the curriculum. If not, I suggest all of you to take at least a foundational course in design thinking or user research. And through user research, this is what we found. We found a behavior very far from the stereotypical representation in media or social media, right? You see Telugu and English typed in, Telugu typed in English, English typed in Telugu. There's audio plus text, queries split into many messages. Now we are going truly multimodal. People might even send images and they say, hey, what is this, right? We also realized that about 80 to 90% of these queries fall within a fairly narrow knowledge domain, and 10% of the queries is where we really need experts. So through this, we decided, let's just focus on addressing queries that fall in this knowledge domain, and let's take the burden away from medical officers, whom today the frontline health workers are bothering for every query, due to which they are not getting enough attention for the queries where they really need expert support, right? And we spent a fair amount of time thinking through what's the evaluation framework. Yes, you will want to do experiments quickly, understand what works, what doesn't work, but very important to come up with an evaluation framework. This evaluation framework is actually just talking about the AI bit. There's a lot of evaluation beyond the AI tool. Are they actually going to use the AI tool the way you expect them to use? Are they going to take actions based on the recommendations or outputs of the AI model? Those should all be part of the evaluations. Here we said, does it understand? Does it have the knowledge? And does it provide useful responses that are actionable and also are not harmful? Right? I will not go into too much here, but a good amount of our we also run some of India's largest open source data initiatives. These are getting open source under Bhashini, under which AI for Bharat works too. And we are seeing incredible difference from the diversity of language we are picking up. 2011 census says we have 1,635 languages, right? And there are many unique ways in which people use languages that is very difficult. So we are building these underpinning systems because a lot of this context, this kind of speaking is not digitized today. And as much as we might drink the Kool-Aid that foundational models will solve everything. The global models that are, such as GPT or Gemini, they might ultimately absorb anything. But so little of our context is actually digitized, and so little of our language is digitized, that it's not going to be possible unless we take some extra effort on this front. So this is another angle of responsible AI. So I'm going to very quickly wrap up with one last piece of work. And here I want to call, so far I just want to remind you a few things we talked about: AI-based solution, system, and not just AI, system view. If you are building any innovation, really think about how it's going to integrate into systems. This is the pain that innovators subject themselves to for years. They build these things, they think they are wonderful, they are very frustrated that no one's adopting it. But please put yourselves in the shoes of the systems owners who have the difficult task of integrating these innovations. And if you take a systems view, usually your problem and solution design shifts to people-centered. We talked about that, not just users as an end users, but all the people involved. Iterative co-innovation, co-implementation. open innovation networks. Earlier in in the first example I used, I did not touch on it enough, but there are several research teams that actually contribute towards those dengue predictions and the underpinning institutional systems. So let me touch on what do I mean by these underpinning institutional systems. Two simple analogies, right? If you think of new AI-based solutions, right, as cars, you need the part names, the specs, supply chains, assembly lines, the test track standards, and the people to actually develop those solutions, right? And we need institutional systems to do this properly in a way that we really reach the underserved billions. So this is one type of systems and underpinning digital infrastructure. And the type is to run those solutions. I mean, you need the roads and signals, right? You need the fueling mechanisms. You need the checkups and maintenance, and of course, again, people. And doing all this essentially requires holistic processes and tools to do that. We tend to give a lot of attention to AI, but there are a lot of other things. And I'll wrap up with the example of an initiative called Midas that we are working with ICMR on. We are helping create a national system for what we say purpose appropriate quality graded data. There is this sense that if we somehow have access to all data in the world, we would solve everything. I'm still very doubtful because so much of our context is not even represented digitally yet, as I explained in example of language. So we find ourselves, so this is a hubs and spoke system where in a problem-centered or thematic or disease hub organization in terms of spokes and hubs and spokes. And what we're doing is we're helping create common standards and ontologies and understanding of what kind of data is required to solve certain prioritized problems, and helping many institutions contribute such data, curate it, and make it available to many researchers. As a proof of concept, we started with oral cancer screening on phone. And what's been heartening to us is we've been able to help some innovators take this all the way from concept stage to getting into the regulatory process under 1 year, right? And this is an amazing acceleration if you know of comparisons in other areas such as X-ray based screening for TB and so on. And even there, certain challenges are still not solved, right? So that's the power of, shared systems, shared ontologies, shared digital public infrastructure, right? Some things I want to call out. Why do we need things like this? Because often I get this sense that folks want to throw all data together and they'll be fine. It's for any disease, if you want to do a screening in general population, you should expect lower percentage of positives and expect many early stage. TB is a classic example. But if you are triaging in a population that's showing up with some symptoms already, let's say they're showing at a primary health center with a cough or showing up at a hospital with fatigue, you should, in that population, you would obviously expect higher positives in later stage. Now, and if you were to build a data set from one context and not the other, is that actually going to be good enough to build AI? Can you transfer sensitivity, specificity claims? You probably will have to overrepresent certain conditions and features, depending on how many classes you're hoping to predict, right? Similarly, this whole idea of quality, we need to take it away from an ivory tower academic definition of a lab or high level facility where things are done the way they are supposed to be done using the latest and greatest devices, to one that actually includes deliberately what you might from some perspective, consider noise, include the low and old modes, and include the deviations you would expect. Similarly, the idea of gold standard, what are the objective tests? And you will need to take special effort because typically, taking dengue as an example, dengue treatment is started, and rightly so, before the final confirmatory test is done, right? So that data, even after perfect digitization through ABDM, will never be part of it. So you're not going to get accurate or complete enough data always, just as part of regular health systems. So we built that, right? As a we think through that as a specific criteria, and we are helping create the standards for those things, right? So just to summarize, responsible AI, think well beyond AI if you really want to have impact. And if impact is the real responsibility we have to think expansively. So let me stop there. I probably have taken longer than expected. Sorry about that. We ended up.
No. We started earlier, so we are all good.
Okay. All right.
And we really don't need a lunch break, right? So we are a virtual thing, so we don't really need to have a lunch break. So we can just keep going.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you for a great talk, right? So, and always grounding these things in real applications that you have worked on makes things a lot more clearer than talking in the ether about this. So I request folks to post their questions to Raghu. So we don't have a separate Q&A box, so just you can do it in the chat itself. It's open to everybody.
Yeah, I was also going to include quizzes now and then. I don't know, Ravi, as a prof, you do that. Include quizzes as you go along to see your class is still awake. Or include trick questions. I wanted to say how many of you are in pajamas, right? as a Mentimeter poll.
No, we do ask questions when we were teaching, and we give the answers also, because we typically don't get any. Sure. So I had a question. I mean, this is because you have been thinking about a whole lot about data, sharing data and formats, privacy, and things like that, right? So this is a dialogue I've had with other people who have been in the space. So what is your thing about informed consent in India? I mean, is it even a thing that is possible, especially when sharing healthcare data? So what do people give consent to, especially in this day and age of even the doctors don't know why they are collecting the data?
Very good question, Ravi. This is difficult. What we've seen is few obvious things to be done are local language and things like that. But the biggest barrier is a tough one that technology alone cannot actually solve, right? And that is actually very cultural, right? We are not used to going to our doctor. Maybe we are, but most, and even we are not entirely. We are not used to questioning our doctor too much, right? So if I'm one of the, I'm and we are very much a yes sir, yes madam culture, right? And in healthcare is even more so. So how do you sensitize the folks taking the consent about the responsibility and need to explain in simple terms, even if it is written in simple terms, right? Is, I think, a huge challenge. Some things that will make an impact here are simple verbal cues. I know folks who are working on these sort of things. We are in touch with folks such as Rahul Mathan, who is a great expert in this space, to figure out how do you bring consent into this. For example, all the data we collect for Midas, we are asking consent to make that data available for research purposes, right? But do people really understand what that means? It is really tough, and I think it's going to come down to simple language, lot of education, sensitization.
Yeah.
There are no. I don't see silver bullets here.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have spoken about this in the past, and I've also had a lot of thoughts about it. So when you say research purposes, right, is that even enough information to people, right? Because I could be using it to come up with the next cancer drug, or I could be using it to increase your insurance premium. Both are research. So which one am I consulting for, right?
No,
So
you're absolutely right. Making elucidating that purpose clearly in a way people understand, and in true spirit, helping making them understand that. Is it possible without dedicated human intermediaries? That's a question I do not have answer to, and very honestly, I am. If you were to ask me to bet today, it's not something we solve, right? It's not something anyone solved, right? So,
So
however,
let me hand over questions to other people. So Bhagyashree has asked this question: are there any initiatives for rural sectors in India from women health perspective? Do you know?
yeah. I mean, see, women's health. If you actually take the edifice of public health system in India,
Hmm?
remember only recently did it the main entity that manages this became National Health Mission. It was called National Rural Health Mission
Yeah.
until few years ago, right? So our whole edifice of public health system is actually very rural focused, and a central program in that is actually maternal and child health, right?
Mhm.
These days, it is actually called more broadly as reproductive and child health, or RMNCH, reproductive, maternal,
Mhm.
neonatal, child health. So these are very much uh, some of the largest initiatives in the country are women focused, right?
Mhm. Okay. So, in fact, that's a related question from collaborator from Hull, Shikant. He's asking, how ready is a developing country like India to use AI at the grassroots level? By ready, I
Thing is,
mean maybe
the
technology.
moment you say AI, I mean India is ready. What do you mean by India is ready, right?
Yeah.
I think this is a very we can spend a lot of time on this, but let me separate this out. The decision makers are very keen, right? The folks that make decisions for these systems, they are getting very excited about it, right? And they're excited to show quick wins. I also think people who are using smartphones are also ready, but in most part I feel like this readiness comes a little bit without enough uh, critical thinking, right? That is actually my worry, right? That there's plenty of readiness in terms of willingness to adopt. There
Mhm.
isn't enough critical thinking on what truly does it mean for us to be prepared to adopt AI, and what does it truly mean for us to use it responsibly, right?
Sure.
So, and I don't think that we can actually a broad swath answer is not very useful. Certain segments, such as let's say finance, where we've had underpinning plumbing for a long time, and ultimate the core is a fairly simple transaction. We are very ready, right? Health is probably your most challenging topic. We are least prepared, I would say.
So this is another question from Dr. Emmanuel Asaria. The current bubble of AI forces AI to be incorporated into all spheres of healthcare. I don't know if it forces, but is it fine or is it only for large scale healthcare issues? Yeah.
Uh, is there a bubble of AI? I do worry about that. Uh, any of you familiar with Gartner hype curves know that there is this hype peak of hype, then it falls down where the expectations become a little too low, and then you plateau out somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think the promise is real. Is there too much hype? Uh, I also think the answer is yes. It's generally true of any technology, but I don't know if ultimately it comes down to the decision makers. No one can truly force anyone. We do have to worry about folks who do not have the agency to make decisions for themselves, and hence the need for institutions such as Center for Responsible AI.
So Gokul, I've been having your hand up for a while, so I'll let you ask the question yourself.
Oh yeah. So actually, I typed it out in the chat. But it's the thing that we talk about explainable AI, and we talk about the need for explanations to be given along with something very critical like clinical decision support systems and things like that. And we talk about how this can improve the trustworthiness of these AI models or systems. How often do in the real world doctors or domain experts they look for explanations? And if they are looking for explanations, what kind of explanations do they look for? So I was just curious.
In my experience, see, it again is broad swath, right? The ones who are trying to do it right always look for explainability, right? They might not use the term explainable AI, but they are certainly trying to understand how and why it's providing the output it's providing, right? So I mean that's the short answer. They're always looking for it, and the different classes of people will look for different type of explainability, right? A doctor might want something really deep. They might want to understand what are the physiological underpinnings, right, and the causal relationships between the medical science and what the AI is saying, right? So but if you go to probably someone who is not thinking so deeply, they might be slightly at a more higher level where they say, okay, I see a heat map of this image, so I kind of understand what part of the image it is seeing and saying this is what it sees, right? So a big part of, for me, this all falls under your evaluations definition. Whenever you build an AI-based solution, you kind of have to ask in that context, what evaluations related to explainability do you need to build in?
Sure.
So again,
in fact,
Gokul and Ravi, I don't think I'm sharing a lot of new wisdom here, right?
No, I mean, the audience is fairly broad, Raghu. I think for many people, the audience, they're probably hearing this for the first time. So I think it's good that we go over this. It's great. So in fact, recently I was having a conversation with Rahul Mathur. He was actually of the opinion that explanations are not very key in healthcare. And we should not force, I mean, regulatory burden should not be there on AI to explain everything in every instance. There are several applications where, and explanations are not needed. And healthcare was one of the domains actually.
Depends on the user at the other side, right? Depends, again, you have to modulate your explanation to the context and the user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's a lay person you are actually directly interacting with, right? I mean, they are used to the doctors pronouncing judgments, so they don't want explanation. Explanations might actually confuse them. It might look like the system giving the decision is actually unsure of itself because it's trying to explain. It's like people might think of it as being defensive.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a very fine line.
Fine line. Yeah. I never thought of it in that frame until I actually spoke to him. But it's a very important thing that we really need to get. Anyway, so and more questions. A lot of questions here. Okay, we have time till 11:15. I hope you are fine.
Yeah, totally fine.
This is a question from Tanish. So as a developer, how should we balance innovation with the need to eliminate bias, model/algorithm bias?
Balance innovation versus the need to eliminate bias. I'm not sure I fully understand.
Me too.
This to me, let me put it this way, right? Again, because I come from a particular perspective, because the only thing I'm interested in is solving the problem. I'm not interested in innovation for innovation's sake, right? So if eliminating bias is what is really important, that's what you need to do, right? And so, Ravi, maybe this is coming from a research perspective where you want to show some novel method from a computer science perspective. I don't know. Maybe that's the question.
Maybe. So Tanishq, if you have a follow-up, you can type it down there. And so the next question is from Milan Pandey. Do you think it is important to define the question problem one is trying to solve and then look for data which is relevant to the problem, or take whatever data is available and come up with answers which we then try and figure out which questions have been answered?
Yeah. I always start with the problem because we want to know the problem is actually something that's worth solving, right? But usually the data effort is almost in parallel, right? Because you're looking for the intersection between what is useful and what's feasible, right? I had earlier shared that whole uh, bunch of different hypotheses, right? Just going back to this whole thing, right? So to me, this is an iterative. This is not sequential. It's iterative, right?
Next, this is from Omer, and this is something that we are actually very much interested in understanding. Has there been notable differences between the attitude of patients towards the use of AI in healthcare between urban and rural India? Have you actually had any experience?
I do not know enough, but I will tell you that there is soon you will see some data on this being published. I'm involved with something called the Lancet Citizens Commission for Reimagining India's Health System, in which we undertook some pretty large-scale surveys, especially in the aftermath of COVID, to understand how have attitudes to technology been impacted through that COVID experience. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens. There are some natural thought experiments you can do about exposure to AI, exposure to technology. But my general sense is, do most folks actually even understand to have an attitude towards something? What does it mean to have that? First of all, you might not even be aware about it too much. In our social circles, social media bubbles and media bubbles, because we all have individual bubbles now, it seems like 90% of the headlines or conversations are around AI. That's probably not the case, and I'm going to guess you'll probably see this more as exposure to technology, and they might just fall along the lines of exposure to technology. I don't know if attitudes to AI will diverge too very differently from attitude to general technology. But happy to share that survey outcomes and the papers soon.
So, Will, do you want to just join the call and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you very much. That was a great talk, Raghu. So I guess my question is, and I'm in complete, so you have to think about the clinical need when you're developing an AI technology, and anyone that develops technology without thinking about the clinical need is very unlikely to get adopted if you don't meet the need. But one challenge I've seen is that the healthcare systems are quite dynamic and non-stationary, and the needs change very quickly. So the time it takes to develop a machine learning solution or AI solution, things have changed. and the population has changed perhaps, or the settings changed. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about how to meet this challenge.
Hey Will, sorry, my connection cut out towards the very end. Could you please repeat that last bit once more?
Yeah, it's fine. So I think the key point is that the healthcare systems change rapidly. Patient pathways change, settings change, and clinical needs change. So if we develop a tool for a certain clinical need, by the time we've got the data and trained the model and so on, the needs changed. So it's a big challenge. I just wondered whether you had any thoughts on that.
No, actually, that's a great. It's a great observation, Will. I often said, like, I use this example from the TB world, where there used to be these thing called MERM boxes. I won't. These are basically pill boxes that used to have USB-A port or something like that. And by the time the health systems, and by the way, you said the health system changes. Actually, I mean, I'm going to say the health system actually doesn't change a whole lot, but the technology and the context around it changes, and hence the problem changes. Right? That's my general observation. But a general principle we try to keep in mind is what's the world going to be 3 years from now? Because 3 to 5 years from now, and try to solve for that, and also ask whether the problem we are asking about today is truly a problem that's going to persist, or is it somewhat transient in nature, right? That is definitely one of the questions we ask. But usually it kind of surprised me when you said, oh, health systems are rapidly changing, because I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? This is one of the slowest changing systems in my experience that I've seen, right? Maybe it's true in some places. Maybe it's true in certain times of change, but useful to also look out. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but usually I keep telling the team, make sure you don't build something for yesterday's problem, because right? So, and maybe someone else, the world in general, is solving that. So maybe we don't need to solve it, right? I also want to acknowledge that the person who asked this question about question problem first or data first is someone himself is one of foremost experts out. Oh no, this is not Milind Tambe, it's Milind Pandey. Sorry, I was wondering, Ravi, why is Milind asking me these questions?
Yeah, so I mean, how is your energy level? So we have more questions popping up.
Sure.
Okay, so this is from Shyam Sundar Singh. Though the tech is growing in exponential rate, the adaptability of legal system to such development and bringing out policies oriented with technology is a bit challenging. How to overcome these to serve the people better? And a related question from Rashina: do you believe the government might eventually implement policies regulating data collection in various sectors? I think, yeah.
I'll again fall back on one of the slides I had. It's this one. So we actually see a fundamental part of the work we do is that just look at the left side of this slide. Earlier I said it's AI based solutions, not just AI. The policy and capacity bit is where I honestly see a lot of effort that's required, right? So I don't think it's a question of will the government do that, will the government do this. The question is, will we as practitioners and researchers have the patience, empathy, wherewithal to engage deeply enough to help shape these systems? So I think that's really the question, and I think that's the collective responsibility we bear. there is this sense that we always look to government for answers, and governments nowhere in the world have been able to keep up with the pace of change in technology, right? So that's unrealistic. And hence the only question then to ask is, can we in the technology community, or folks who straddle both technology and who are trying to straddle both technology and impact, work with stakeholders to make this happen? Sorry, I'm giving a lot of gray area kind of answers.
Oh, the questions are great. So
yeah, it's
see, one of the things I typically when I give talks about responsible AI, right? So I always kind of start by saying that as long as AI was interacting with well understood systems like nuclear fusion reactors, right? Everything was clear cut. It is not very dangerous. But when AI starts interacting with human beings, things go for a toss. So we are in a very, very intimate interaction in terms of healthcare. So I think answers are great. I agree. So I'm going to paraphrase.
So I like to say it's not rocket science. It's far more difficult.
Yep.
Planetary motions are easy to predict.
Hey, but you have to say that catching a rocket coming back is really cool.
It's just absolutely right.
Mind blowing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just going to one last question, Dhaval, if we may. I'm just going to paraphrase a question from Geeta. So, are we at a stage, right? Has AI really advanced to the stage where we can actually productionize it at the national scale in India, especially in the healthcare setting, right? So, I mean, are we still more in the research proof of concept kind of situation, or are we ready to go out to the country?
Productionizing development of AI, is that what they're saying?
No, productionizing AI solutions to the national scale.
Productionizing. Right? No, again, it comes down to what are you talking about? If you're talking about relatively fairly narrow use cases, such as all of us speaking to our phones and saying transfer money to so and so in my contact list, right? That's productionizable.
No, the healthcare.
Healthcare depends, right? There are some things that I think are productionizable. If you take radiology and certain within radiology, if you want to say more screening type use cases and not so much about very granular diagnostics type solutions, I think we are ready, right? But the reason we are not we are ready from the AI perspective, perhaps the reason we are not ready is we do not have the systems that can validate, monitor, and update continuously. That's the bit that's not ready, right? Because we cannot validate these solutions once for all or for all places and deploy them everywhere, right? It's not like a static chemistry of a biomedical device, right? Where that chemistry will not change, right? Reagent X reacts with reagent Y, changes color, tells me whether Y is there or not there, right? That fundamentally doesn't change. Whereas we have black box models where we might not fully understand what factors we are capturing. So my thinking is one of the key elements that we are not ready with is the process of having a kind of a distributed benchmarking, monitoring, and updating. Right? This is the reason why we are working with ICMR on Midas, for example, right? And there's lots of need for these sort of systems.
So let's thank Raghu for an amazing talk and also patiently answering so many questions for us. And so we can't really applaud. I'm going to put in that applaud icon there. If you want to applaud,
thanks,
Thank
Ravi,
you
for the opportunity. Looking forward to continuing interactions and happy for folks to reach out with any follow-up questions and things like that. Yeah. All right.
Sure. So Dhaval, you want to say some organizational stuff?